one, and now you want to talk about your 499. I'm happy to do that. So what ideas do you have? Do you have a company in mind?
I'm looking at ABC Early Childhood, so we're looking at Franklin Centre, which has got about 8 centres involved in it. I've approached Cindy Young, which is the manager for the area, and she said that she'll help me do my 499, be my sponsor.
Right.
So now I'm just looking at what I need to research, like
Okay.
what would be something, and I was looking at something along the lines of job satisfaction.
Okay.
Something like that as
Right.
an HR topic.
Well, go back to the client and say, if I was working with you over a period of time, what would you like to know about this organisation? And that, to me, is a sounder way of going about it than, perhaps trying to grasp out the topic for yourself. Okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I think the things, what I like about the approach you've taken so far is this. You have already done some thinking about it. You've done some exploration. You've started to, try to suss things out. Because I, like perhaps with my colleagues, we get a bit frustrated when people come along with a blank sheet. Okay? So for me, for a 499 to work well, and they can work well, and you can learn an awful lot from them and do a lot of good for yourself. I think the thing is that to do that exploration, to go back to the client and talk, and then the most important part I think of 499 for me is that you sit yourself down somewhere, you have a good think, and you focus on the purpose of your 499. Now the purpose is not to do a 499. You need to be able to say, not that what you're going to do, I'm going to do interviews, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. What is the purpose of this investigation? And when you put a proposal together for me, I want that in one line. The purpose of this investigation is to examine, and you know what it is. Then, for me, the second important part is you focus. You bring it down and you focus. Maybe 3 objectives that you're going to, which is going to drive this 499. And you might want to turn those into 3 researcher questions. 1, I want to examine staff turnover in the Franklin office. I want to identify the reasons for that, and I want to find ways of perhaps improving that or doing something about it. So when these work well, and they often do, it's the students have really given thought to what they're trying to achieve. I had 2 people come to see me yesterday, 2 women. They'd done the exploration, they talked to people, they came along, we had this conversation, you could see the light, they were brightened up by the whole thing, they could go off now, do more research, come up with a proposal, but it's driven by the purpose and driven by the objectives.
Well, I guess your 499 is such an important part of your degree. It's the first real practical thing we get to do, and using the last 3 years of our education, I guess. I think what you said about making sure your objectives are really clear is quite important, because it's something that you can get off topic about.
Easy, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess with the literature review as well, thinking around your topic, because one of the questions I was thinking is, within my topic, do I look at other stuff? So say if I did job satisfaction, am I meant to look at other things, or am I meant to focus purely on my topic?
Ask her, what would she like if she had a researcher, legs and brains for 3 months or so, to look at a problem? So I would say do something also that you can learn from. Don't go for an easy one like, oh, I could. So you want to learn something about the process, about doing research, about an important topic, of working with a real organisation and building relationships. You do a good job, it can open doors.
And now the issue is going to be to do some analysis. The first part of the analysis is to look at the internal of an organization, to look at what that organization does inside, how it relates to its stakeholders, what its culture is, what its mission, vision statement are, and to analyze from the inside view of the stakeholders what this organization is set out to do. Stakeholders of a firm include a whole range of internal and external people, institutions, partners, relationships that an organization has. In a large city, Athens here, you would have an enormous number of stakeholders. The important part is that this gives you a chance to start applying some of the strategic analysis methods that you would have learned about before, a SWOT analysis, a Porter's 5, various ways to analyze how an organization is positioned within the network of stakeholders and how it develops its own mission going forward, to what extent it has one, and how that is actually pursued. The next step is then to go from the internal analysis to the external analysis, and it is good to then also do your literature review at this time. The purpose of a literature review is not to string together a large number of quotes to fill pages. It is there for you to identify specific issues that have been reported by other researchers in similar situations that your client can learn from, either of what to do or what not to do. In a literature review, make sure that you cite properly what is your work and what is the work of the authors you cite. It makes perfect sense when you have a quote to then relate that quote to your firm, so that there is a connection between the literature review and what you're trying to do. Nothing is more boring, nothing is more irrelevant than to just have page after page of quotes that are then sitting there, and the reader has to identify for himself or herself how they fit in with your project. Make sure that you consult with your supervisor on the sequence of the steps. In some projects, it makes sense to do some analysis before you do the literature review. In many of the projects, the literature review would come first. The next phase of your 499 will be that you start collecting data. You now have a good idea what your proposal looks like. You've discussed it with your supervisor. You have done your literature review. You have some good pointers from other researchers as to what could be suggested in similar situations. And now the trick will be to collect data from your own client organization, so you can merge together where they are and where the literature says they could possibly go. Before you do any data collection, whether it's a survey, whether it's a telephone interview, whether it is anything in person, you need ethics approval from your supervisor. The school requires that any sort of data collection is something that you do only after it's been approved, so that you don't have a problem later on with the data you want to use. Remember one thing. This is a 499 not to tell the client what he or she wants to hear. This is a 499 to tell the client what he or she needs to know. So it is important that you're objective when you collect the data, so that you end up with something that you can then use. It's also a good idea to tell the client something they don't know. The clients know their business better than you. They know their stakeholders better than you. But you, as an independent person using good strategic analysis methods, will be able to identify possibly some areas that the client does not know of, or at least has not yet seen in the same light as you might. Before we do that, let me introduce Professor Jim Barker, a good colleague of mine who also does quite a number of 499s. And similar to me and some of the other people you meet at the management school, Jim has a long history of international teaching and consulting experience, and he'll talk to you about the 499 from his perspective. So here's Jim Barker.